I am an architect.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm an architect. I own my own company.
Oh, thank you. And Alex, it's just so everybody knows.
Yeah, I'll fill everyone else in. My degree's in architecture. I just don't have my license, but I do work for McKelvey Homes, home builder in St. Louis area.
So you do mostly residential architecture?
Yes, we are strictly residential.
Okay, so that brings us to the review of the last meeting minutes. Is there anyone on here that would have reviewed those? I did.
I looked them over as well. I did not have any comments.
Okay, and neither do I. So we'll need a motion to approve.
Yeah, I'll put a motion to approve.
I guess I'll second that, and then all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Like nobody's opposed. All right.
Thank you.
We have two items on our agenda tonight: Monarch Fire Protection District and the Wardenburg Farm Subdivision. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Joe.
Well, Mr. Dial, I'm going to have Mr. Newberry read the request into the record, and we're also going to promote some of the design team for the Monarch Fire Protection District while we're doing that as well. Actually, while Travis does the hosting, I'll go ahead and read it into the record if you don't mind, sir. The first item is initial review of the architectural elevations and related materials for a planned new fire station, PZ 11-20, Monarch Fire Protection District, with living quarters and associated parking areas, which also includes the extension of public sanitary sewer service to the site. The new fire station is proposed to be placed on a 3-acre tract of land that is zoned NU non-urban resident district and located on the south side of Wild Horse Creek Road at its intersection with Etherton Road. Street addresses 18304 Wild Horse Creek Road and 18304 Wild Horse Creek Road. And there is a sliver of land. That's why we have two addresses for one property. Unit A, St. Louis County locator numbers 19W 510215 and 19W 510194. The use in the subject zoning district designation, NU non-urban district, requires a conditional use permit, which is scheduled for a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission on September 21st, 2020. Mr. Chair and members of the board, this particular property is located in Ward 1.
That was very interesting.
Thank you, sir.
So are we going to move right into that item?
Yes, if you don't mind, sir, I have a few introductory comments, and then I'm going to let the design team introduce themselves as they prepare their presentation for the board tonight. As the advertisement mentioned, members of the board, the property is located on Wild Horse Creek Road at its intersection with Etherton Road. It's located in the northern part of the city of Wildwood. It is a approximately 3-acre tract of land, and its intended use is a new firehouse with associated services. Currently, the property is used for a single-family dwelling. The dwelling's been on that site for an extended period of time and is currently vacant since the purchase of the property by the Monarch Fire Protection District. We were fortunate to have the design team provide the preliminary site development plan for the purposes of the upcoming public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission. So you were able to get some additional information about the site, its character, and how the fire district is proposing to place the building and improvements upon it. As you can see, it is a large building in terms of footprint. I've estimated about 11,500 square feet. There's 3 components associated with it, which I believe the design team will go into greater detail. And for the most part, the intent is to place the building at the 50-foot setback from Wild Horse Creek Road and try to minimize the extent of site disturbance to the south, which does adjoin an existing single-family dwelling that is occupied. Kind of a quirky situation in that That single-family dwelling is served by a private easement that is located on this particular site along its westernmost boundary. So there is an access point beyond the current driveway to the vacant single-family dwelling. But again, that goes to the lot to the south. That easement will be memorialized, if not already, but we believe it is, as part of the zoning process. And for all intents and purposes, the Planning and Zoning Commission will address a number of items relating to stormwater management, utility provision, et cetera. I do want to highlight that the fire district is taking a very proactive step and intends to extend public sanitary sewer service to the site. It's been something that the city of Wildwood has encouraged other property owners over the years to consider, but there's just such an expense to it. So we do appreciate the fact that the fire district is extending sewer and making it closer to others in its vicinity. Finally, the petitioner has provided a number of items in support of their application to the board. They have offered to you the overall site design statement, the building design statement, along with a colorized rendering of the site plan, and then obviously renderings of the buildings, and then photographs of the site to orientate yourself. So with that, Mr. Chair and members of the board, I know I'm doing it quickly, but I want to give the design team ample time to present their proposal to you all. But Mr. Newberry and I are available for any comments or questions regarding the zoning process of the city, any of the materials that have been provided in advance of today's meeting, and any other comments you might have in this regard. So thank you.
So this is Dave Dial again. Typically we don't ask for a long or presentation of projects. We review it and then ask questions, but that's a little bit harder to do on the phone all the time. So I would like you guys to present your design and go through the design statement. Don't read it, but explain the building. But don't let it be lengthy. Just keep it quick.
I think Chair Dial meant succinct.
So who from the fire district will be presenting, talking?
So if I can be the first to start, this is Josh Mandel. I'm an architect with FGM Architects, and I think we're joined by several members of the fire district. So I'm not sure if they intend to join me in the presentation. I know that they may be they're able to, and they may be called upon to answer questions, but Assistant Chief Les Cruz and Fire Inspector Leo Schwartz are on, and I think Chief Spiegel may have been on as well, Chief Kerry Spiegel. So with that kind of brief introduction, if I can launch into an overview of what was submitted to the points of both being succinct, but also kind of giving a refresher, if you will, to what we submitted, that would be my intent. I assume that all of you have received the submittal, and you may not have had a ton of time to go through it. So to Mr. Dial's point, I will briefly review what we've got, but then kind of leave ourselves open to answering questions or a discussion for sure.
Perfect.
Travis and Joe, are you intending to share screen, or is this really kind of, oh, there we go. I was going to say, I've got it pulled up kind of in the background as well. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that some of the items submitted really in support of the planning and zoning hearing later this month have been commingled with the architectural review submittal. So that's good, because I think it provides a more well-rounded picture. I think Joe kind of alluded to that. So the project, as Joe referenced, and as you've read and seen in the submittal, is a satellite fire station, an engine house that would be manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is to replace the engine house number 2, which is currently at 18,400 approximately Wild Horse Creek on the west side of 109, also on the south side of Wild Horse Creek Road. The district purchased this property at the southwest quadrant of the intersection of Etherton Road, Old Etherton, at Wild Horse Creek. There is currently a residence on it, which will, as part of this project, be torn down. And then the new fire station, new engine house would sit, as Joe mentioned, at the 50-foot setback line, as close as we can get it to Wild Horse Creek for efficiency of egress and kind of minimal impact to the overall site. Also, the intent is to really build on the flattest part of the site. If you're familiar with the topography, the grade starts out at the north end with a slight slope down and then really falls off once you get to about midway from north to south. So there's several reasons to be that way, to be oriented towards the north end. And we also then respect our neighbors to the south and can maintain as much of the tree canopy as possible. The intent of the project, again, is a replacement satellite fire station. It will have fire apparatus housed within an engine room. It will have a hose drying component, as well as some apparatus support pieces, which are currently shown on the east side of the building. And then on the west side of the building is generically what I would refer to as living quarters. There'll be a kitchen, a day room, a shift office, and several bunk rooms and a laundry room. So essentially there's the floor plan. Essentially it is a residential style space for firefighting crews and ambulance crews while they're waiting to get called out for either training or for fire or medical calls. Building floor plan is approximately 12,500 square feet gross. It is a single story building. However, on the east side on this plan, you'll see that there's a mezzanine called for, which counts in the eyes of the code as a single story, but it is a second level just on that eastern portion of the plan. In the elevation views, you see a fairly extensive use of masonry materials. The apparatus would egress to the north towards Wild Horse Creek, but would actually load in from the south. So there are sectional overhead doors visible on the south elevation and what we call fourfold doors or bifolding pairs of doors on the north side that are painted red. And they are actually a quick actuating door system that allows the fire apparatus to egress much faster than with the old-fashioned sectional overhead doors. They're also a pretty snazzy color, as you can see in the rendering. We, again, have a fairly extensive use of masonry. The entry to the living quarters, which is also sort of a public vestibule, public lobby where visitors can reach in. Actually, if you look at the north elevation, that's what would face Wild Horse Creek, and you can see a kind of, for lack of a better expression, a porch or sort of welcoming entry that allows for some cover overhead and really signifies to the public where they would want to go if they're visiting the fire station. In the site plan, you can see that there's some public parking, accessible parking there as well. On the west elevation, we pick up some of that same stone detailing to provide a little covered porch and patio for the firefighters. They have a barbecue grill and a little outdoor seating area for when they are not on calls. I think in the subsequent images, we have some three-dimensional perspective views that are rendered. In this slide on the upper half of the page, you see sort of a straight on north elevation in daytime lighting. And then in the lower half of this slide, you see the sort of twilight view, a little bit more from the northeast position. And you can see the height of the element to the left of the apparatus bay is the tallest piece of this. Top of masonry is, I believe, 26 feet. I think we may have that called out in elevations, but it's the tallest piece on the site versus the apparatus bay, which is about 22 feet tall, and the residential portion, which is about 14 feet top of masonry. And I think the latter slides, if I recall correctly, show like an excerpt of materials. So we are looking at a palette that is composed of multiple clay brick. The brick number 1 and brick number 3 are essentially an accent brick. Brick number 2 is the principal use on the exterior elevation. We've got some use of cast stone product, some metal, pre-finished metal trim panels, architectural laminated shingles, and then the overhead doors I mentioned are a fire engine red color, as is called out by the manufacturer. We're using clear glazing or potentially some tinted glazing, but there will be a minimal amount of fenestration to the facility, just primarily bunk rooms, shift office, and then the doors into the apparatus bay. And I think that's a pretty good overview of the materials you've got in front of you. I think that there was what was added to this from the P&Z hearing materials was the survey, the topographic survey of the site. and then potentially the site sections, right? So that gives you a sense of how that topography falls off. And I'm glad this is showing now. So one of the components that we are anticipating needing is a retaining wall along, essentially parallel with Wild Horse Creek, at the back side of the fire engine house. And you can see in the top and the middle section, so section 1 and section 2, you can see the relative height of that. Our finished floor, at least the way we're designing right now, is a couple feet below Wild Horse Creek. And that puts us several feet, you can see there on the right-hand side, probably to the tune of about 30 feet above the residence that's to the south of the house. So there's quite a bit of topographic relief. And we're using the retaining wall to negotiate how close the building gets to that fall off in elevation. And then obviously to avoid developing the southern third roughly of the ground on the 18304 site. Oh, and then there's some photographs in here. Well, I believe that was part of the list of items. So this shows you the existing conditions at the site. Let's see, probably of most interest, if you're unfamiliar with this ground, is photo number 3. This is looking south at the driveway, which is part of the private access easement on the western side of the fire district site. That's how the neighbor to the south is able to access their property, and the fire district's directions to us and our plans currently show that being unaffected, untouched, and essentially maintained as a private access easement and only for neighbors' use. And then the other image to show is probably number 6. That is the view standing right at the tree line. So that's, I took these photos. So that's with your kind of back to the dense tree line. You see the few kind of specimen or grand trees that are sprinkled out beyond the main copse on the property. And that's the residence there that I believe, I forget his first name, but Gerst. There's a gentleman named Gerst who was an architect who lived and I believe had an office in this home. So with that, I will stop chewing your ears and see if there's any either questions about what we presented here that I didn't go over, if I missed anything, or if there's any questions about the project or whatever I can address for you.
That was exactly the type of explanation I like. Talked fast and got to the point.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that. Questions from anyone? Travis, are we supposed to raise our hand somehow?
This is Bill Behrman. I have a question. I think the building looks great. I just had one question. What are you guys doing for lighting in the back?
So at this point, I can tell you that we haven't designed the site lighting, but I can tell you that from experience, both in the city of Wildwood and other communities where we're always concerned about lighting, light pollution, lighting styles, light spread, et cetera. But I know that there's going to be requirements to demonstrate our, our photometric count, our photometric levels, our lighting levels on the site, so that we both comply with code from an illumination perspective, and so that we demonstrate that we're not leaking light over property lines and kind of spoiling others' environments. So I can tell you that the likelihood is we'll have a larger quantity of low site standard lighting as opposed to trying to do it with more higher lighting. And we'll use house cutoff shields so that it's directed at the kind of the fire district side of the line. And then we have not really gone down the path of choosing fixtures, but one of the things that we would bring up to the fire district is, just exactly what they intend to accomplish. So we have to balance the code required illumination level with the city's stipulations for lighting controls, lighting pollution, et cetera. And then somewhere in between is going to be what the fire district wants to accomplish, if they want as much lighting as is legal and so forth.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Bill, any more questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question about the brick material. You mentioned that 2 of them are accent colors. I was just wondering if you could explain exactly where each of them are accenting, just because the renderings, if they're separate colors, they're not showing up too well on our color renderings.
Understood. It looks like Travis is trying to get back to the graphics, and I'll be happy to point that out too when we're looking at them. So looking at the elevations first, in the view that you're seeing here, and I'm trying to remember now. So brick 2 is kind of the lightest, and that is the principal brick that you can see. And actually, either the elevations or the renderings, Travis, either one is acceptable. I think I can point it out. And if you're able to zoom in on one of those, there you go. So it is somewhat covered up by the shadow from the eave of the roof. But what I would point out to you is looking at this, for example, on the left side, I think where Travis' cursor is, that is brick number 1. That is the kind of medium brown brick. The brick to essentially where the numeral 2 is located is brick number 2, which is the really, let's call it the field brick. And then there's a water table between those two, which is fairly difficult to see in this rendering. And I think it's somewhat of an issue of quality over time being reproduced, but that brick would be used essentially as water table, as sills, and as trim around windows, which probably if we go back to the elevations, both these renderings really show the north side, but on the elevation views, you can see that there are some, like if you zoom in on the east elevation, yeah, so it almost shows up as a gray brick here, but you can see that water table piece kind of at the top of the wainscot level and separating the brick number 2, which is the lightest color, from the darkest color, which is brick number 1, is brick number 3. So the renderings don't really hold true to or the elevations rather don't really hold true to these, but that ebony brick would be the water table. Brick number 2, the one called chestnut, would be the field brick, and then the wainscot and the side of the hose tower would be the Oxford gray, brick number 1. And I don't know if you typically request this or if that's uncharted territory, but we can certainly provide what I would refer to as either hand carriers or panel samples. You'd actually see the real brick. I know typically these would be done in person, and we probably have a little more show and tell than through Zoom, but if that's something of interest, we can drop those off to City Hall.
So are you saying that brick number 3 is just the water table and underneath it is brick number 1?
That is correct. There's more use of brick number 3 than I think appears in these renderings because of the eave, the shadow from the eave. I believe above the, almost like the top 4-6 courses, something like that. So a little less than 2 feet worth of brick would be at the top of masonry, right underneath the roof line would be that brick number 3. So it's judiciously
what texture
used.
are those bricks?
They are all smooth. The way we're kind of looking at it today, I think we, in our office, have talked about the use of a velour for the field brick or a wire cut, but we have not gotten that far quite yet.
And your mortar, do the joints are, I guess they're going to be standard concave joints, but is it just limestone colored mortar, natural?
Right now, I would say natural is the intent, but I'll also confess that we've not explored other color options. If anything, we'd probably go with something a little warmer because of the warm tones of the brick number 1, brick number 2, you know, and probably, you know, being critical of our own documents here, I would say we probably ought to reorder and have brick number 1 be the field brick and brick number 2, you know, sort of that they're ordered and numbered in kind of use quantity, relative quantity. See things a little clearer sometimes when you're looking at them with fresh eyes. But yeah, I think right now they're all labeled as smooth brick as opposed to velour or wire cut or another texture.
Okay. Oh yeah, I do see that on there. Anybody else have questions?
I just have one question. Where the overhead doors or the 4 fold doors are imaged, where the numbers are, what is that material? What's that gray material above? Is that, what am I looking at? There's like a gray
the gray material would be, the gray material immediately above the doors would be the metal panels. And then the trim around the doors. Again, our coloring, it looks like it's a little warped here, but the white material would be stone, and the arch material where you see the numerals would be the metal panel. like the Alucobond or, pre-finished metal panel system.
So that's the metal cladding white? Or is that something different?
Yeah, it's labeled here white, but the intent is for the principal material that surrounds those openings to be stone.
So do you have two colors of Alucobond?
Yeah, in the rendering, it does look like that. It looks like there's well, no, it looks like there's a gray. No, they're all gray. I believe the ones over the apparatus doors and then to their right, as you're looking at this image in the kind of the front entry porch, there again is some metal kind of inset or backset panels with the address numerals on it. Right.
So what's the material where those lights are?
That is stone as well.
Okay. And then around the stairwell opening is stone?
That's correct.
Okay.
What color are the?
Well, I would like.
What color and material are the window frames?
I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, the window frames. What material and color are those? Where that large window frame is and the tall elements of the building?
So that's architectural cast stone. Again, there's something funky with our color output, I guess, on these, or somehow this is getting warped. The idea is that trim around the window opening on the host tower, the trim around the jambs of the apparatus doors, and then the porch itself are a stone material.
Okay, and then the window mullions and frames themselves are aluminum, I'm assuming?
Yes, we would be using either aluminum storefront, or depending on that host tower size, it may be curtain wall, but I think it probably can all be done with storefront. So it's a 2-inch face frame, pre-finished metal. And they show here as white, but I believe the intent is anodized bronze. So I don't know if that was done for the purpose of these elevations or exactly what, but in the other elevation, like east elevation and west elevation, you can see the window frames. They should be a bronze color. So it may just be because that glass on the stair tower is dark. They took license with it. I didn't notice that before.
What color is the glass?
So right now I would say we're looking at either clear or perceived as clear with a slight tint. There's, it kind of giving the client benefit of the doubt. I don't know if we've really gotten to that level of discussion with them and said, do you want to, look at any sort of filming or privacy or anything like that? But they've also not asked for that directly. So right now I would say we're trending towards a clear glass or a glass with a slight tint. And then one thing they have talked with us about is use of environmentally, energy saving features. I get my words out. And so we would be using probably a selective glass with a visibly, you wouldn't be able to tell, but it would be a coating that would probably result in it being about 5% tinted, but it would allow for them to avoid some solar heat gain.
Just a low E coating?
Correct. And maybe a gas fill, all that tends to, if you were to compare with purely clear glass, it would look a little different, but it's not going to be like a low iron glass or a green or a gold or anything like that. That's not what we've not been asked for that, and we don't anticipate using that either.
Travis, can you put up the building sections again, or the site sections? That retaining wall in the back is about 20 feet tall.
Correct. I think right now we're measuring 18, but yeah, it's roughly 20 feet.
So you mentioned that the photograph was taken at the dense tree line looking north. How dense is the tree line, and how tall are those trees? The existing woods. I
would say exceptionally dense. In places, it looks like they've been thinned a little bit, but for the most part, it's natural wood growth, natural kind of forest growth with minimal thinning. So I describe it as dense, and then height of the trees, I bet 40, 50 feet for the mature large, the oaks and so forth.
So that's what it is, just natural woods back there with oak trees. So
that's my read.
Like
yes,
it isn't. Okay, so they're not just scrubby trees.
Correct. One of the nice things about this site, and one of the nice things about the topography and the fire district's proposed use of the site is that, and I may be getting a little ahead of myself, but we are trending towards keeping roughly 3/4 of the existing tree canopy, because most of the tree canopy is in that southern half, southern third of the site. There's a copse of trees between the neighbor's driveway and the kind of the meat of where we intend to build. And then there's some trees at the northeast and along the eastern side. We think that most on the east will be able to be maintained, except we're gonna have to, if we're entering off of Etherton Road, we're gonna be potentially slicing through a portion of those. But the great thing again is that the bulk of the, let's say, old growth, existing growth will be maintained. It looks like there was a question that came up on the chat for a second. I didn't get to read it. Will there be any grand trees removed? I don't know if that's appropriate for me to answer or not, but I can help if that's appropriate.
We'll get to that in a moment, but the retaining wall looks like it starts at Etherton Road, and I guess it gradually gets bigger till its tallest point is about where the building is, and then it turns the corner where the trash enclosure is. Does it go north from there?
I guess the way I would describe it, and it may be easier to look, sorry to make you flip back and forth, Travis, but if we were looking at a site plan, yes, that's a good view. So orienting you on the east side, correct. Yeah, well, if you start in the northwest corner, that's the staff parking area. And there would be probably a 2 to 3 foot retaining wall in that upper corner. And then it would basically extend as the grade falls away down to the, approximately 20-foot height in that southwest corner. And then it would run over to the east, not reaching all the way to Etherton, because the grade does something funny. It swales in parallel to Old Etherton, and then it jumps back up and kind of has actually a little bit of a berm. So there's a natural swale there, and we intend to kind of maintain that contour with respect to stormwater and discharge. But the retaining wall is able to end, you can see probably 50, 60 feet, I would say, from the right of way of the road.
I see that. So the colored site plan looks like that we have in our packets looks just to be old. It's not quite accurate with the trees on the upper left and the distance from the parking lot to the little road.
That's accurate. Well, I think the civil engineer may not be showing those trees, but I don't think that those are in conflict with the parking area.
Because it just looks on here, the retaining wall doesn't turn the corner, and then there's just not as much room where those trees are. So if we can get that clarified, or at least update the colored site plan to use the civil plan, or whichever is accurate. Let me put it that way. And then here's my concern, and I'm not overly concerned about it, but if you're the neighbor, go back to that last site plan again, please, Travis. If you're the neighbor to the south, what is right to the south? A house?
Yes, there's a residence if you follow the driveway that's along the west side of the fire district property, the driveway curls to the east, essentially does about what I'm guessing to be about a 90-degree turn. And then the residence that is to the south is, my read on it is that that's a fairly shallow north to south property that extends off Old Etherton, essentially, that lot. And so if I can orient you that way, the house is essentially in the western most third of that lot from Etherton all the way to kind of driveway. But yes,
how
the house
close are they to how close are they to your property line?
I'm not sure I've measured it. I would guess 25, 30 feet, maybe a little less.
Okay, so here's my concern. Maybe you can answer this completely for me right now, but if you're standing there in their driveway, and are they going to see that monster retaining wall? And then what is the retaining wall made out of? That's what I want to discuss.
Understood. In reverse order right now, what we're planning is not sure what the scale would be yet, but an interlocking concrete block like a Versalock or a Ready Rock wall. So the retaining wall will be a unitized type retaining wall. And then, yes, I think if you're standing in the neighbor's driveway, I've not gone past the property line on the neighbor's driveway. I've stood kind of right at the edge and tried to get a sense of what that was. And there may even be a photograph in that grouping. But yes, I think you would be looking through trees from the neighbor's house at the retaining wall. Just in terms of answer to your question. Yeah, maybe that didn't make it onto the sheet. I know I took some photos. If you imagine number 6, I'm probably 50 plus feet from the property line, and probably even more like 60 or 70 feet from the property line in photo number 6. So then the neighbor would be that dimension from property line, obviously plus property line to their home, looking through trees at that retaining wall. And maybe I should leave it there, but I think when you consider the site sections, there's a good amount of topographic relief, meaning there's a good separation essentially. So although their view would be of retaining wall, that I think they're not looking at activity. Which is
If I
quite
can
positive.
talk, I don't know how to raise my hand, but if I can interject, I actually own that house back there. My daughter lives there, so I can tell you that the house itself sits right on the property line and is right at the end of that. It's indicated on that site plan.
Okay.
And Mr.
So
Chair,
when you're go ahead. Sorry, Joe.
my apologies, you go first, sir.
If you're back at your house then and you're looking that way, is that in fact a dense forest?
It is in the summertime. It is not in the wintertime.
Okay. And then the retaining wall material, some sort of Versalock, some sort of modular wall, do you have a color picked out? Is it going to be like just limestone color, or do you plan on something that matches or blends in a little bit better? And then what do you plan on doing below the retaining wall? Is it grass that's going to be maintained?
There would be turf for very little amount of space because we're trying to preserve either all of or the vast majority of the natural tree canopy. So it may actually be more logical and less maintenance for there not to be turf, but rather to be kind of natural mulch material before the tree line. But the tree line and the bottom of the wall should be fairly close to one another.
The reason I'm concerned is obviously the wall is part of the architecture of the site. It's part of the whole site. I really would hate it to go out there and just see, weeds growing and stuff down there on the wall, and the neighbor's stuck with that view forever.
Sure.
So the maintenance of that will be quite important, but I don't know how the city will address that, because it's really, other than it's part of the architecture, it's a little bit beyond the Architectural Review Board's purview.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, if I may, I was fortunate enough to be invited out to this site by the Monarch Fire Protection District, and Ms. Loge and her daughter were in attendance as well. So I was able to go on the neighboring side, and it is truly just a seasonal buffer for 6 months of the year when the leaves are off the trees. The fire station and all of its improvements will be visible. And I can guarantee you that the Planning and Zoning Commission will be cognizant of that. And I believe the fire district is aware of it as well, and will take steps to mitigate as much as possible any of the potential impacts. And just for the new members of the Architectural Review Board, we typically don't allow limestone colored block walls. We think that's the least expensive way and the least attractive way to basically hold grade. So we look for different colors to complement that which is on the site and in the surrounding area. Thank you, sir.
One thing that I really do like, the architecture of the building itself, if you've noticed, you got very few comments on that. It's very nice. It's got it's just really nice on the site. It fits there. So seeing that through the trees and out there, I think that'll be a nice element. I was just a little bit worried about the wall, the great big wall that it's sitting on. We've all seen how those can turn out. They can be very nice and they can be very bad. So it's just it's an issue. The rear elevation is treated just like the rest of the building. So I'm not concerned about that at all. Matter of fact, I really like the architecture. You did a very good job.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
I'll pass along the kudos to the team. I don't like to take their credit away from them.
That's okay.
Thank
That's
you.
why you're here. You get all the credit. So, Joe, I'm going to ask a question here in front of everyone. What's the review? Are they in for full approval tonight, or are they in as a preliminary review, or what did they submit for?
I'm sure the architect and the fire district would appreciate a full review and action tonight, but I think there's a few things that need to be kind of reordered in the presentation. You've asked for a better colorized site plan. Mr. Mandel has mentioned that he needs to reorder the brick so it follows a more logical pattern. Those were his words, not mine. So I think there's just a few things that can be done to add to the information you received, like the color of the block retaining walls, so we can address that for you before you take final action, et cetera. So I think you could give them conceptual approval based upon the few comments they've received tonight, and it could be returned at the next meeting of the board.
I want to add a couple of things to that list. I think everyone is aware of the things that were Mr. Mandel said weren't quite resolved yet or weren't quite discussed yet. So we do, in order to give a final approval, we do need to know what those are. I don't see any roadblocks. I think you guys did an awesome job. But we want a new colored site plan that matches the civil. If we could get a rendering that has not been reproduced 1,000 times, just email it. That would be awesome. Even though my monitor will probably change the colors to pink. So the new rendering, the windows and the glass, if you could fix those on the rendering, but let us know what they're going to be.
We'll add those to the material sheet for sure.
And then some more information on the retaining wall. Now I know your retaining wall company, whoever builds that, will be required to, of course, make that safe and sound, but just pay special attention to that. And then is there going to be a fence on top of the retaining wall, or how are you going to protect the people driving and walking up there
Right,
from
good
falling
question.
off?
So there will be a guard rail and a fence, like a vehicle guardrail and a fence to prevent people from falling over, plus vehicles from falling over. Now, to the extent that we can code compliant wise use a single method to provide both vehicle and pedestrian fall protection, we would probably do so, but we may be needing to put a more decorative fence up behind the guardrail itself.
Okay, so we'll need to see that too, because I'm very concerned about the big wall with a big site-proof fence. You know, we don't really want that.
Sure.
So, I mean, I would be something more airy that you can see right through would be a lot better than a big site-proof fence. But let's see what that is as well.
Yes, sir. No problem.
And last on my list, it looks like there's a monument sign or something out front.
You're correct.
We don't use signage, but Joe, have they submitted that?
No, sir. That'll be part of the Planning and Zoning Commission's review.
Okay. So Travis, it looks like with all the things we've mentioned, if you don't have to repeat them. I think we all know what they are, but we can go for, if someone will make a motion for a conditional approval.
Mr. Chair, if I may, were there any other comments from the other board members beyond those that you just identified that we want to get on the list just one last time?
I didn't have any.
So there was a chat question. I don't know if that's appropriate to talk about now or after vote or whatnot.
We forgot to go back to that. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, it is my anticipation that a few grand trees may be removed given the increase in size of the footprint of the structure. But there is a formula we use for replacing grand trees that has been in place for a few years now. And so we'll do our very best to kind of offset that loss. Some of those grand trees are in not the best of shape. It's not to say that they couldn't be pruned and made to look better, but a couple of them look like they've seen their better days. But we can do an assessment. That's something the commission can identify as part of their permit process. So I will tell you that we'll be very cautious with the grand trees, and any restoration will meet our code.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like Deborah has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Councilmember McCutcheon. I can't tell if somebody answered me or not, but my concern too was the grand trees, but I think Joe had addressed that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing the board to just take one last glance before we made the motion. So thank you.
No, I'm glad. I should have done that myself. Thanks, Joe. Okay, now, motion to conditionally approve. Anyone?
I'll make the motion to conditionally approve.
Thank you. Any second to the
And
motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Travis, will you do a roll call vote for this one?
Yes, sir. Chair Dial,
Yes.
Board Member Sinani,
Yes.
Board Member Bierman,
Yes.
Alternate Bartlesmeyer,
Yes.
and Alternate Loja.
I'm going to abstain.
So that is it's enough to have a quorum there and approve it. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, 4 out of 5, that is a approval. And
Okay.
we'll get a list of those things together so we can send them off to the fire district and their architectural firm. We'll also copy you all in so we make sure we captured your thoughts.
I would like to just reiterate how nice the presentation was and the packet and the materials. You did an awesome job, and the Monarch Fire District, as always, does an awesome job.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next item. And Travis, I fixed it so I can stick around through this one as well.
Thank you.
Well, Mr.
All
Chair,
right,
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Joe. I was just going to ask you to do that.
Oh, apologies again. While Travis exits some and enters others, I'll go ahead and read it into the record. Review of architectural elevations and related materials for an entry gate that is planned in conjunction with the Wardenburg Farms subdivision. The gate will be situated within the platted private roadway easement to control access on this private roadway that serves the platted 9 lots. The property is zoned NU non-urban resident district and generally located on the south side of Wild Horse Creek Road, west of Steeple Lane. 302 and 303 Wardenburg Farms Drive, St. Louis County locator numbers 19, it's missing the letter, so my apologies, 640235 and 19, missing the letter, 640192. The property is located in Ward 1.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome, sir.
Is there anyone to present or discuss it, or are we just going to dig in?
Well, Mr. Chair, there's a couple of representatives from the subdivision. One is the trustee that's been kind of overseeing this effort, and I believe the other is the individual that's prepared a lot of the materials that you have available for you tonight. And with your permission, Mr. Chair, just a couple of things the department would like to add. Up into a couple of years ago, the city of Wildwood did not allow gated communities. There had been a number of discussions at city council level over the years, and for the most part were not authorized. As I mentioned, within the last few years, that has changed, and there is a list of requirements a subdivision must meet before a gate could be installed to control access into their particular subdivision. In this particular case, Mr. Taliban has done all the legwork and been able to obtain the necessary amount of signatures from property owners to proceed forward with the gate. Once that was achieved, few steps involve the Department of Planning, the Department of Public Works, and then finally the Architectural Review Board. As part of the regulations governing gated communities, the Architectural Review Board must review the components of the gate structure, whatever those may be. If there are questions relating to the other components of the regulations, where the gate must be set from the edge of roadway or right of way, things along those lines, the department will be glad to accommodate them. I would note that this was originally a 10-lot subdivision. Ultimately, 2 of the lots were combined through a boundary adjustment, so there are 9 lots. It is located on Wild Horse Creek Road to the east of Etherton Road. So we're kind of to the west of Wild Horse Creek Road, and Etherton Road is to the west. And so we're kind of on Wild Horse Creek Road tonight for both of our items. And so with that, Mr. Chair, members of the board, if there are any questions about the platting of the subdivision, anything relating to the street, which is private and exists in a 50-foot right-of-way and is 26 feet in width, the department would be glad to entertain them at this time. Thank you.
Looks like there's no questions on that.
I don't see any hands either,
Well,
sir.
Will
Thank
the
you again.
presenters show their pictures, or Travis show the pictures, and you guys can explain exactly what you're doing?
Sure. Thanks to all the committee members. I'm Jeff Totleben. I live at 314 Wardenburg Farms Drive. I'm one of the trustees of the neighborhood. And as Mr. Vunich said, I've been working on this project in the background, just trying to do my best to make sure we're in compliance with the ordinance that was passed to allow such a gate. So as Mr. Vunich mentioned, it's a 9-lot neighborhood. There will only be 8 homes in here ever. There's currently 7 homes. So we had to wait for a couple of years to get to the point where we could even consider this gate per the way the ordinance was drafted. We have a circular fountain off of Wild Horse Creek Road. This is Travis is showing some pictures. So you're coming off Wild Horse Creek Road, you see this fountain, and this gate would be after the fountain. Travis, if you go back to the picture before, yeah, this is the front entrance off of Wild Horse Creek Road. And one of the main points I wanted to make is that we are going to mirror these, not the small landscaping wall here, but the columns that say Wardenburg Farms. We're going to mirror the design of those columns, and we're going to put them on the other side of the circle after you pass the fountain, and the gate will go between those columns. So it'll be a 6-foot high total column with a 4-inch limestone cap, exact same color and materials. This picture right here that Travis has paused on the other side of the fountain, as you start getting into the neighborhood, there is a brick ribbon right there, and that's approximately where the gate would go. So the columns would be on either side of this gate, and the gate would be in between the columns. The gate swings completely open down the street or into the neighborhood. We've been working very closely with the city on making sure that we have all the first responder approvals, fire, police, MoDOT, things like that. And this drawing from our architect here shows the approximate location of the gate in the circle, and it has a pretty good idea of what the gate is going to be. It's a custom gate. It's steel painted black. Kirkwood Fence is building it to exactly our drawing. So, what you see here is what you're going to get. What we don't have tonight is a plot plan showing the exact distance of the gate from Wild Horse Creek Road, but it's approximately 180 feet from the road itself and 150 feet from the easement of the road. So I think the minimum distance required is 60 feet. So we're more than good there. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward, just matching the existing architecture of the columns and putting a steel gate there.
Thank you for that. Does any board members have any questions?
I had a question. I was just wondering, You mentioned that the columns will match the existing. I was just wondering what material and color we're anticipating for the gate itself.
Mark, I'll defer to you for that since you've been working on with a stonemason.
Sorry, second Zoom ever. The materials that were used to build the columns previously were a stone clef. They call it edge stone clef. It's a natural stone that's the original developer of the subdivision used. So everything is going to match that. It's a sand brown with an earth tone grout as well. The columns at the front of the subdivision are 6 foot tall, 35 inches square, and so the new ones will match that to the best of the ability. There'll be a slight difference when they're first installed because it's not as weathered as what's there now, but in a short period of time, it'll weather into the same colors.
Okay. What about the gate material and color?
The gate material itself is steel, structural steel, that's going to be painted black.
Okay.
per Kirkwood's design.
Is that steel? Obviously, that's going to rust over time. You're either going to be painting it a lot, and even if you get it galvanized, you'll still be painting it a lot. Just keep that in mind. Once you paint,
Yes.
you always paint.
Yes, absolutely. There was discussion about powder coating, but with the manufacturing of the welding and things like that, they're concerned about the powder coating.
It would still rust. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So there will be some maintenance involved with the upkeep of the gate, but yeah, I mean, you have the controller systems as well that have to be maintained. So
yeah,
it should be no different.
Other board member questions? Well, as usual, I do. How wide is each gate?
The total width of the gates is 32 foot. So each side will be a 16-foot swing.
Okay. So when I first looked at this, the scale of the columns it was funny. It just looks small. You tell me they're 6 feet tall, so they're just a little extra wide, and you're matching what's there. So since you're matching what's there, of course, I wouldn't dare to suggest doing anything different. What I'm very concerned about, though, is that gate. It looks like it's a freestanding gate without a wheel on the end or anything, which they never work either. So what's going to be critical is how to hold that gate up with the hinges themselves, and then, of course, just the structure of the weight of that thing and the soil. So those are going to be massive footings. I assume that whoever's building the gate, there's a structural engineer designing the footings.
The architect has drawn the footings as per requested by Kirkwood Fence.
Okay.
So it sounds like a horrible assumption, but my assumption is that Kirkwood has someone within their organization that has given us, given us the information necessary to make that structurally sound.
The city will require a licensed structural engineer's sign and seal on those drawings for those footings, because that's a big deal. With soil, they would just lean over after time, and you certainly don't want that. Really, that's my only concern. The rest of it, I think the photos you showed of your existing columns and everything looks very nice. The neighborhood looks awesome. I think the gate will actually look pretty good, and I love the fact that it's on the other side of the cul-de-sac. So I think it's a great project.
Thank you. If I could add one more comment to your earlier concern. I had 3 companies come out and bid on this project. And I initially thought that maybe we could save money by doing something that was kind of, I didn't know if there was like a standard size gate that you could buy like off the rack and then build the columns around to fit that. And the more I talked to Kirkwood Fence, and Chesterfield Fence was also a close second on this, The more I talk to these two companies, they convinced me that going with a custom gate specifically engineered for this purpose was the better way to go and would be less maintenance for us in the long run. I'm certainly aware that we're going to be painting this occasionally, and it's going to become part of our annual budget, just like we have to maintain the fountain and the columns and the lights and everything else there. So I appreciate your concern, and I agree with you. And, you know, to Mark's comment, you know, Kirkwood Fence assured me that, you know, once we kind of agree on the dimensions, they are going to manufacture this and engineer it in a way that it doesn't sag, and, you know, there's a warranty they have to own up to for all that and everything. So I get it. I'm definitely concerned about the same thing, but ultimately I have to trust the vendor here to do the right thing and show us that they can provide what they said they could.
Well, don't trust them. Get them to get a signature and a seal on the structural drawings for that footing.
Absolutely. No, it's good advice. We certainly will.
Please do. It's for your own good.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I think it's a very aesthetically pleasing fence in addition to your neighborhood. Any other comments? Okay, then let's go through the same routine. We need a first and a second and a vote.
First.
Okay, that's a motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
All right, Travis, you want to do another roll call vote since we're online?
Sure. Chair Dial,
Yes.
Board Member Sinani,
Yes.
Board Member Bierman,
Yes.
Alternate Bartlesmeyer,
Yes.
and Alternate Loja.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's all we have tonight. And I do want to extend my welcome again to the new members, and thank you for coming tonight.
So can I, before we close, I guess I can since I'm the chair, also welcome the new members. And I'd like everyone to kind of hear my theory of our meetings. If you haven't yet, please get a copy of the ordinance that forms the Architectural Review Board and read through what our job is to do. It doesn't mean we can never comment on things that are outside of our job description, but we certainly don't want to step on other people's toes. And what I really liked about tonight is if you don't have something to say, you don't need to talk. There's never pressure to add. You don't have to outdo anyone, but if you see something, absolutely speak up anytime. Okay. Public comment? Any public out there?
We do
Travis?
have one in attendance. That's Councilmember Clark. If she would like to provide a comment this time, she can raise her hand using Zoom, and we'll get her in as a panelist. And we'll just give it a few moments.
Okay. Our next meeting date is October 8th, if in fact we have a meeting. And then I'll have a motion for adjournment.
I'll motion for adjournment.
Second?
I'll
Looks
second
like
that.
Bill did that quietly. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you
Thank
very
you all
much,
again.
everybody.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good night.
Thank you.
and
Stay
nice to
healthy
meet the
and
new
safe.
members.
Bye.
Good night, all. Mr. Newberry, thank you.